Computer, sorry. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Today is May the 27th, 2022, and Brenda and I are here once again to share some insights and some ideas with people through these insane times that we're dealing with right now. Today, we're going to talk about healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships, and where is the love in these crazy times. So how are you this morning, Brenda?
Very well, Sandy. How are you doing?
Right on. I'm doing fine as well. You look radiant today.
Oh, thank you. I feel radiant. I just did a treatment on somebody, so I got all that glow going on.
I hear you.
You can't run it through you and not get a little stuck in there, eh?
Oh, yes, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about what's going on with a lot of the energies, and a few things have come up with demonics and dark energies coming at people. And I've had a few people telling me that they're actually seeing the demons jump out of people, or the demons are coming, they're like a portal's opening and they're jumping at them. So there's a lot of things going on that are creating a lot of uncertainty in people's lives. They aren't sure how to handle it, what to do about it. And we're talking about healthy relationships and how that can sometimes impact what's going on with the relationship with somebody else, and you might not even know it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
And that's interesting because the demonic energies are very prevalent right now. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to, and a lot of people don't even believe in that. But I can tell you, you gotta start believing in magic and all kinds of it, because that's what's being used right now in a big way with everybody. And yes. Demonics are part of that. They're a part of that dark black magic that's been perpetrated on humanity for a very long time now. And the faster we get to it, start believing in it and working it ourselves, not the black stuff, but the light stuff, we start to dispel and transmute all that, obviously. So
yes,
yeah.
And I think I agree with that the faster we get at it, maybe not the faster, but the more intensely we get at it and recognize it's there. I started listening to an audio recording last night. I think it's 11 hours long, or yesterday I was reading it, listening to it, and it's Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Oh, I wasn't 2 chapters in and I was in a mood and a half, because when you realize all of this was set up back in the 70s and 80s to take us down and do what they're doing to us now. They were trying then. And I just finished the chapter where they're talking about the Patriots. They knew back then that they were going to round up the Patriots and take them to FEMA camps. So now people are identifying as patriots right now. I don't identify with any labels. I try not to. But it's interesting that so many people are identifying as patriots now. And I'm thinking back to January 6th and the patriots that were put in jail, and some of them are still there. And it's just crazy, crazy.
It is crazy. And that's it. Eh? It's one of those things that I, just as a side note, I'm looking for a new vehicle after I got sideswiped a couple of months ago there. And I said to my husband, he's like, well, we got to get another Jeep. And I said, well, I only want a Liberty or a Patriot. I'm not going Cherokee no more, but I said, I am those. And he laughed. He said, you are so funny. You're all about the message. I don't care. I'm all about the message. And I don't care about the label so much as you just got to flaunt your stuff and be in your truth, right? And that is my truth, definitely.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And even though I don't use the labels, we're on the same page. A lot of us are on the same page with that, right? So when you're noticing unhealthy relationships, what are you noticing with people in particular? Like, I'm finding people are getting discouraged with their partner, or disgruntled or disheartened, or they didn't think like their relationship isn't, we talked earlier about fulfilling. There's something missing in the relationship. Is it that there's something missing, or that they're growing and they're outgrowing their partners, or business partners, friends? There could be a multitude of different types of relationships.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good concept right there to think about, is the whole outgrowing. Not everybody grows together. And so sometimes you have one that's going to grow a little more or a little faster, or a little broader than the other. But if the other one still catches up in their own time, then there's some work there. There's some progression. But a lot of people are finding they're literally outgrowing the relationship in and of itself, and the other person just does not want to grow at all. They're just reluctant or resistant to it. And it's often frightening. We have to understand that, dealing with shadows and dark stuff and our inadequacies, right? That's the key right there, is very intimidating to a lot of people. And they don't want to look at their shortcomings. They don't want to look at where they are perhaps not fully and completely in the love, or understanding even, or understanding truly what love is all about, or what it really encompasses. That is where we need to look.
Yes,
at the love part. Yeah.
And looking forward, going forward, let's redefine it and decide what it is that we want in our lives that encompasses the love, because it's hard right now feeling love when we're seeing some of the shenanigans that are going on. People are getting angry, and there's nothing wrong with anger either, because you have to process the anger, feel it for what it is, whatever it's telling you. But what is the love? What is that component that's missing? And the unconditional love, I think that's confusing as well, because people say unconditional love, but that doesn't mean you can't set boundaries. Doesn't mean you're a doormat, you know? So it's really interesting. It's funny, I was working with somebody yesterday who came to me because he thought he was depressed. And I'm working on him, and I'm clearing and you know, that moved a few emotions out and got them out of the way. And I'm like, you're not depressed, you're bored. And he looked at me and he perks right up. He retired a few years ago, but didn't retire to something. Electronics are messing with his head. He's always on his electronic gadget. So a few things were happening there, right? But it was interesting. But his wife is highly spiritual and highly aware. And I said, you got to catch up to her. You're slowing her down. And this is what he came to see me about, but this is what was coming up. And he's quite excited to keep coming back and starting to increase his awareness. He loves his wife very much. He understands what the significance, how important she is to him. And he is to her. He understands it both ways, right? But he's excited to grow. So growing doesn't have to be a scary thing either.
No, it doesn't. And you're not supposed to struggle while you're doing it. Grass doesn't struggle to grow. Most things don't. We're not supposed to. It's not natural. But that's interesting, because depression and boredom and even anxiety, they often have a lot to do with the frequency you're putting out, right? And depression and boredom especially are slower frequencies. You just need to amp it up a little bit so that you're actually in a space that is progressive and uplifting, right? More than anything. That's important to recognize as well. That's a good point.
Yes, your environment. Yeah. And that's what we were, by the time he left, you could see he was already picking up in frequency. You could see that was happening once he realized. But you know, it's funny, sometimes we don't realize what our emotional state is. We think we're in something, and then you go to somebody else and you get a different perspective. And we both know that it's up to the individual to heal, recover, whatever. We both subscribe to that. But it was just interesting hearing somebody else's take, and all of a sudden he started picking himself up. And it's like, you know, and the electronics, a lot of people, especially if they have a high intellect or a mental function, it's really good to get off the electronics. Because I had asked him, and he gave me permission to speak to his wife the next morning, but I had asked him about what he does for games, and he's always on the computer playing games. And I said, go and get a book of games like Sudoku or something, where you have to sit there and write with your hand and fill in the numbers, you know, start using your mental abilities differently, get the electronic cobwebs out of there. So
that is very important. And we don't realize those are detours and diversions and deterrents, right? For us, they keep us occupied. They're more of a preoccupation rather than, and that's it. You're supposed to, it's doing everything for you. You are no longer engaging your own mental processes or your own left and right brain hemispheres, which is, that's, you know, it's part of their diabolical plan, right? That they turn everybody over to an AI, some sort of artificial intelligence. But we are the most advanced technology on this planet. Totally. And most people don't even think like that.
I know, and that's our creativity and our imagination, and that's what that electronics have taken away from us, right? For a lot of people, they've taken that and hijacked that. So unhealthy relationships, you know, it's interesting what we're talking about. You know, I've had people coming to me and they're not happy in their partnership. And you can also go in and read the energy. And for most people, I've had a few that I say, no, you need to get out of that situation. It's not going to change. But for most people, what I find is the relationship is still going to be okay down the road. But how do you amuse yourself and go and distract yourself and find something that you like to do? So maybe your partner is still a little bit on the 3D side of things. So what? So you spend a day doing 3D things, or, you know, maybe the physical, the what do you call it? Like, I'm not saying gardening because that can be spiritual, but like maybe you have a TV day or something like that. Maybe you do something that you wouldn't normally want to do, but you still connect with that person. But try to meet them halfway if you can. And it's not always halfway, but try to do something that they like to do, even if you're not a fan of it. So what if it's a couple hours, right? You know, I'm not saying, yeah, right. So give them a chance to catch on that without pressure.
Exactly. But you can't always, or you can, I suppose, if you choose to. Everybody's got choice here, right? But the idea is that if you're going to allow yourself a day of 3D where you spend it either watching movies or TV or, you know, playing video games or whatnot, then you have to impress upon that other person that they should at least, or at least ought to, maybe not should, because we should should on ourselves an awful lot, but ought to investigate, explore, and engage with you in a 5D, 6D, 10D way, so that
Yes.
they can sort of amp up their energy a little bit and see the difference. Because the minute you start doing gardening or connecting with nature or walking or whatever it may be, and you go back to the other, there's a noticeable difference in frequency. There's a feeling that is just totally different. And that's
Yes.
what we need to recognize. They've taken us away from nature, right? And that's
Yes.
the whole thing for them, is to take everybody away from nature and to make us less than natural.
Yes.
So, it's good to have a little give and take, but if it's always give, and nothing is being received for you, from your side or on your side or with your stuff, you got to really investigate that too.
Yes, and it's an imbalance, right? And so it's interesting you use the word receive. I work with a lot of people that would complain that their partner wouldn't give. But when it came, I would do a few different exercises with them. But what it came down to is they didn't know how to receive. They didn't know how to receive love. They didn't know how to receive compliments. They didn't know how to receive a gift. They felt, if you've given me a gift, I have to reciprocate. And it's like, no, just receive for the benefit of receiving. So there could be all kinds of reasons why things aren't working. And it's easy to assume it's the other person. And it may or may not be. I'm not saying one way or the other. But it's interesting when we start to really look at ourselves. One, with the tapping protocols, the EFT. Well, I don't know how, if you use that or not, but there's one way of setting it up, and it says, although I have, and you state what the issue is, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And you say that 3 times, 3 different ways, and then you start into your protocol. So that was just the setup. But it was interesting how many people, when I was, I used to do that a lot more than I do now. But when I would start with, I deeply and appreciate, love, and accept myself, they could not say love. So that was okay. That gave me a signal right then and there of where they were at, which is no judgment, it's just where they're at. So then you go and explore, why can't they love themselves? Because we're asking where the love is. It's also self-love. Self-care is whether you're giving yourself a hug, whether you're giving yourself a nice bath, treating yourself to something that you enjoy, whether it's oils, a walk in nature, time out with friends or loved ones, like whatever that is, right? But making sure that you give yourself your own self-love.
That is probably, I think, within my own work and for a number of years now, something I find with a lot of people is they aren't willing. They're not even open to that, because we confuse sometimes receiving for ourselves with being selfish. And
I think that's a program.
Pardon me?
I think we're programmed. We're programmed to think if you look after yourself or you treat yourself with respect, that you're somehow being self-centered, and that's not what it is at all, right? No.
And that's the thing, right? Because a number of years ago, I was guided by some very high ascended beings to start preaching something called righteous selfishness. Well, I was like, yeah, okay, ladies, like, ain't nobody want to be selfish and nobody wants to be righteous about it. That's for sure. And they would not let up. And I mean, when, for me, and I deal with a lot of higher vibrational energies. So it was people, ascended masters like, Mother Mary coming to me. And I'm like, wait a minute. She's like, no, you have to start teaching this. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, right. Well, it took me like 8 years of trying to push that, or put that out, that idea out for people. And eventually I said to her, I got it. And we're able to teach people that, because selfishness, she said, what's wrong with that? And I said, well, look in the dictionary. She said, that's your first mistake. The dictionary is man-made and it's got its own connotation. I'm like, okay, because the second definition of selfish was technically just keeping good things for oneself. There was no detriment of others involved there. There was none of this. It's only me and only, just me. And she said, well, what's wrong with that? I said, nothing. I can't really find anything wrong with keeping good things for yourself. Like, if nobody else is there. So I found that over the years with a lot of my clients, the people I need to teach that to are the people who are so not selfish and so unwilling to give to themselves or receive for themselves that, I say to them, they're like, I don't really know about that. I'm like, listen, I have to teach you what this is. So that means there's really there's no risk to you going overboard with it if you're not comfortable with opening the door to begin with. So it was one of those really interesting things. Now, eventually I was able to sort of change the wording. We went to sacred selfishness, and that was even a bit of a hard sell for people. So now we call it sacred self-fulfillment, which is very a much more accepting or less intimidating version of the same thing. And it is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but that's the problem, is that we have been programmed that selfish is a bad thing. And quite honestly, I've said to a lot of people, I don't want people who are I don't want people to become self-absorbed, but I don't mind people who are a little self-centered, because when shit hits the fan, I want somebody who is centered in themselves, not somebody who's absorbed with themselves. There's a big difference, and maybe a fine line, but still there is a definite difference there. So it's one of those things that it's all in the wording, isn't it?
It is, totally. And it's funny, we're both experience the same thing. We both work with people who overgive. And overgiving means you under receive, you undergive to yourself, right? So that was one that came up. And overgiving is also a program. Taught to worry about everybody else. And there's a time and a place that you do worry about other people and you do show concerns and compassion and empathy. But there's also a time where you just say, no, this is for me. Totally for me, right? You know what other word came up when you were talking is unworthy. How many people think they're unworthy of good things? And that is another problem, because what it teaches you, then you can't receive if you don't feel worthy.
If you haven't earned it, or you don't deserve it. All of those are bad programs that have been instilled in us all since children. You don't get an allowance if you don't earn it. You don't get this. Everything is about compensation. And that's, again, trust and self-worth are probably the two main themes I find with almost all my clients for like 18, 20 years now. Predominantly, like those are core issues with a lot of people. And worthy is one of the again, part of the plan of the diabolical peoples to, make us distanced from our divinity. Because in your divinity, when you recognize who you are, you're worthy. You've never not been worthy. You've never not deserved.
Yes. And I see that with a lot of people as well. And that's the trust issues. That's why we have such a materialistic world and everybody's an expert and everybody's compartmentalized, because you're not going to be an expert in life, because there's got to be somebody else you have to go to. It doesn't matter, but whatever the field of study is, there's always someone else who's more knowledgeable than you. And that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they trust that person over themselves. And I was watching, there was a show today and they were talking about Dr. David Martin. And he's saying, like what's happening with the medical procedures going on at this point in time. He said, if they were wearing a hoodie or gang colors, we would call them murderous. We would call them murderers. He goes, but because they put on a lab coat, we hold them in high esteem. He goes, no, they still by now, they have no excuse for not knowing what they're doing with whatever, it doesn't matter. Like the medical system was the leading cause of death in the United States, I think with 300,000 people dying every year, it was estimated, with medical procedures or taking the pharmaceuticals the way they were supposed to, so, and it's just interesting to see where the priorities are. And then they're told it's all about the guns, getting the guns off the streets. Gun violence is 30,000 deaths a year, approximately. I'm not saying either one is okay, but just, we get told what our priorities are. We get told what we're supposed to worship or what we value. That's the other one, worshiping, right? Who's worthy of worship? Yourself as your God, as part of that spark itself, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it does come back to, do you love yourself? Because if you loved yourself, you would never create a situation where you're going to harm another.
Yes.
Because you realize you're part of that collective and they're just a part of you, a piece of God, right? Or a piece of creator, whatever you call the divine being or the divine force. And we're all just little sparks of light from that particular space. But again, do you love yourself? If you don't love yourself and you're not willing to even love yourself, running the risk of sounding selfish about it, well, you've got a lot more work to do than you actually think you do.
Yes. Right.
Truth.
And I agree with that. And it's so interesting. Other people I'm listening to right now are talking about the egos, as we're watching the egos fall away. We're going to see this come up more and more as we start watching people jockeying for position. And I've experienced a lot of that recently, but it's like, we're not in competition. We're leaving that old model, and we're seeing it in the spiritual communities. We're seeing it in the awakening communities, that people are jockeying for position. It's like, we're not in contact. We're not in competition. We're in competition with ourselves to bring ourselves to our highest potential, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing, so many people in this kind of work will say, or there is this huge competition. And I'm like, I send all kinds of people to other readers or other healers or other, whatever the heck it is, treatment people, whatever you want to call them. I send all kinds of people, not because I'm not capable or qualified, but because I feel that that's where and if I was intimidated about whether or not I was going to have that client come back or have any more money from them, whatever, that would be an issue for me, but it's not. Why? Because there's enough for everybody. There's plenty for everybody. And the minute I put that competition and fear in place there, that I won't get back or I won't be worthy or whatever, then I lose. I shoot myself in the foot, and where am I then? Yeah. Conceit, egos, right? We talk about conceit and arrogance. I mean, that's the difference between loving yourself fully and completely and loving another in the same way versus being in a place of arrogance, conceit, or vanity, or whatever it may be. And they're very, very different.
Totally. And you're right about the sending people to other practitioners, whatever words you want to use, because not one person can do everything for everybody. Sometimes you do need to take a break or go to another teacher or learn from somebody else. And there's no right or wrong to it, right? You just know when the time is right. Is it a physical clearing you need? Is it emotional, mental? Is it a detox? Whatever it is it physical detox, spiritual detox, whatever it is. If you're not qualified, if you know somebody who is, go for it. Share it.
Well, and even doing some of the same things that I do. Like I've sent other people. I'm a psychic medium, but I've sent other people, some of my own clients, to others who are doing the very same thing, but in a different way. Maybe because they're a little more honed in than I am or whatnot. Like I'm not a trained medium, but I know evidential mediums who have been trained in that. So they deliver different messages in a different construct than I do. I'm like, I always say to people, I'm just sitting on the couch, the doorbell rings, somebody hands me a paper, and I hope to God I can figure out who it's for and what it says. I mean, that's the deal with me. I've never really focused in on the medium. It's just a natural gift I have. But as far as psychic goes, I'm all that in a bag of party mix. And I mean, that's not conceit. That's just, I know what I can do. And you have to trust. You have to trust in your own qualifications in order to actually be in a place of non-competition with others.
Yes. And to let people know that you know what you're doing. Same thing, right?
Absolutely. And I am fully capable. But again, I'm not about, getting the name, getting the date, getting all of this stuff. It's just like I said, it's like a note I get handed to me and I'm like, well, shit, what's that say? I'm trying to figure out who it's for. And I get obviously messages and certain things that come and are very crystal clear to me. But when it comes to just going to a specific medium for just that, then I do send people to others who I know are way better at it than I am. Doesn't mean I'm not any good. It just means that they're better at it than I am.
Yeah, and I don't ever look at it as competition. I look at it as what am I going to get from that person, or I always often if I go to see a medium, I study them to see what they're reading, because sometimes they'll tell me they're reading my Akash, and it's like, what you just told me is not in my Akash. But you realize they're reading the energy field. That's when you realize everybody can read it if we take the time to learn how to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So, and do it for ourselves.
We're all hardwired for it. I mean, okay, we started with some of us were 24 and some of us even 48 strands, but we got knocked down to a 12 strand, and then they decided to clip us even more, make us down to that 2-strand DNA. But within that 10 strands, there is incredible capability for connection to all things. And I mean, whether it's psychic ability or not, or whatever, we're all capable. I mean, I have a program that I teach people that you are psychic, no matter what you think. You're predominantly psychic in everything. But you're strongest in ones to start with. You can develop the rest of them. Yes. And intuition is a completely different deal, by the way. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, but it's a completely different area. And everybody has intuition, right? Good vibes, bad vibes, all that stuff. And we wonder, how did I know that? Or this person called when I was thinking about it. Well, that's not just psychic ability, which comes from outside, or the information comes from outside. Intuition comes from divine connection, but it's interesting because when it comes to that, like I do read the energy, I read the energy field, and I'll say to people, you have a closet around you 6 to 12 feet off your body is a field of energy that I go to, and I read all kinds of stuff from that. And anybody and everybody is capable of doing that. Just how good are you at it is the deal, right? And how much time do you focus on honing that skill?
And it's practice. So yesterday I was at a stoplight, and I was I was turning left, so I had a red light. The people going both directions had a green light, and I'm watching to see the number to see as it counts down, and it's going to turn yellow. And I said, I'm going to see 2 more vehicles come through here. So there's a vehicle in front of me, so I couldn't see what was going on. So I said, I'm going to see 2 more vehicles come through this intersection before I get to turn. Next thing you know, it turns yellow. 1 vehicle goes through, it turns yellow. And then it turns red. And I'm like, man, I thought I was going to see 2 of them. Sure enough, a truck rolls through a red light. And I'm like, but like, you practice with silly little things that don't mean anything, but you just test your intuition. There's no right or wrong. You just go with your gut feeling. You go with your intuition. How many vehicles are coming through? But I thought for sure there was going to be 2. And like I said, he rolls through a red light, and I'm like, okay.
So. Yeah. And that's it, right? So we all have that ability. And that, by the way, also does help us recognize not only our self-worth, but trusting ourselves, because those are very key elements to working those abilities and working with your intuition as well. Very much.
Know what a yes feels like, and know what a no feels like, because that's your gut feeling and your intuition. So both of those tie in pretty heavily. So it's interesting with everything that's going on right now. I know May is a big energetic month. I think there's a lot of electromagnetic energies coming on the planet right now. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of confusion happening is what I'm finding. A lot of people are confused. They aren't sure what to do right now. But there's something that we're talking about that people can practice for themselves. Even if you're waiting for a partner to clue in, or wake up to something, you know, keep working on yourself while that's happening. And that was interesting, like I said yesterday. So this man that thought he was depressed, and I said, no, you're bored. And when it came out that his wife is highly psychic, and I said, she's got to slow down for you. So it'd be neat if you could kind of meet her part way. But hearing that from somebody other than the partner saying it, I guess that was a couple of days ago, but other than the partner saying it, it has a different energy source to it. And I don't speak woo-woo. You know, that's the other thing. Sometimes if we get too complicated or too out there within our vocabulary, it can be very intimidating. It doesn't have to be. But like I said, you get a piece of paper and you get a message comes to you through that paper. Is it through the handwriting? Is it through the touch of the paper? Is it the fact somebody else has touched that paper? You know, when you touch somebody else's item, sometimes you can get an intuitive hit through that. Like there's all kinds of things that we can do, right?
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is we are energetic beings. So we are constantly reading and responding to that energy, right? We're always being a transmission of it, as well as receiving signals from it. And it's important to note because, I mean, almost everybody will tell you they can walk into a room and feel tension when there's been a fight, but it's over now, but you can feel it. They all say you can cut it like a knife or with a knife. Well, that's you reading the energy around you and responding to it. And once we come back to the fact that we are energetic beings, and that it's all about working that energy and using it with love, that we do that, then you're in a completely different power place, a power place like nothing ever before.
And I'm agreeing with that as well. And it's going to be interesting because as we're watching more of the shenanigans happen, I think some people who are ready are going to go into that higher realm of consciousness. And I think what's happening, we're receiving, we're seeing darkness in all the dimensions and the inner dimensions, in between the dimensions. So just because you're going through something, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong as you're waking up. If there's an energy there that's not positive, all it means is you can see it or feel it or sense it on a different dimension. So we are going to be going through a bit of a turmoil for a while, but again, you know, have love in your heart. Maybe you just send it away with love and say, I'm not interested today. Maybe you need to be firmer and set a stronger boundary with whatever that energy is, or even if it's a person, doesn't matter what it is, right? So just know that you have the right to protect yourself and stand up for yourself and be good to yourself, love yourself.
Absolutely. Free will is everything. And, you know, May is the transformative month. I've often said 5 is a transformational number, and May is the 5th month. And what we find as well in nature, especially on this side of the world right now, even there on the other side as well, because they're moving into winter time, but we're moving into summer. And of course, you have that beautiful transformation very illustrated to you around you, right? We have trees blooming and flowers blooming and all this wonderful stuff, grass is greening, all of that. I mean, that's important for us, but we also know that there is huge change and transformation happening in that time. We can see it, it's evident. But again, you know, holding true to your love for you, loving nature and loving whatever it is that you're, you know, feeling good about, focusing on the good rather than, I mean, stuff's going to come up. We all have shadow stuff to deal with. Everybody has darkness in them. Everybody. If anybody was completely telling me that they're full of light all the time, I'd say bullshit. I'd call bullshit. And quite honestly, you're not really aware of the light if you don't recognize the backdrop of darkness with it.
I find anyone who says they're all the love and the light, they won't go inside. They just say, this is my persona, this is my message, and it's shallow.
That's a facade, right? That's what you present to the world, but that's not who you truly are. And if you're too afraid to go inside to yourself and really look at who you are and what you got going on, and whether or not you truly know what love is and that you are love, you know, you've got a lot more work to do than you think you do.
Right. And it's okay not to, if you're not sure if you love yourself, and if you're not sure if you're worthy, just work with somebody who can help you find your way until you can do it for yourself.
Absolutely.
I always found the scariest person anybody's ever going to meet is themselves if they haven't gone in and done the inner work and haven't healed their pain or whatever suffering they've had. A lot of times I find people have a fear, but the fear is something that is not, it wouldn't be significant to anybody else. It's just a fear that they're not adequate or they're doing something wrong or they've made a mistake, but it's not big to anybody else. It's just their restriction. They're holding themselves back. So as we move into the new era and the new timelines, it's really important that you understand. And even if you've done something wrong when you didn't know any better, the idea is that you clear that out, apologize if you need to, forgive yourself if it's appropriate, and don't do it again and move on. You know, so like we're going to hit hiccups. It's like moving 2 steps forward and 1 back sometimes, and then 3 steps forward, 2 back. That's what life is all about. It's not all, you know, roses and sunshine. Like sometimes we hit hiccups, and that's just what it is.
Absolutely. And you know, coming up to June is going to be a big month. A lot of people don't realize what's coming, but there are an enormous amount of revelations coming in June. And June has 3666 days in it. So quite honestly, you're going to see a lot of stuff revealed to people and, you know, to the public that we aren't maybe necessarily prepared for. Most people aren't prepared for, but a lot of us that are waking up, or those of us that have been awake for a while now and are waiting on the others to wake up, we know what's coming and we know what it's all about. And got to come back to love. You've got to keep that focus of love, because it comes to the surface so that it can be acknowledged for what it is, and that love can heal it, because love heals everything.
It is.
That's
the
my
one. Yes, it is the one for sure. It is. It's interesting. 666, we were taught that they're negative numbers, and they're not. They're actually manifestation numbers, but we've been taught to hate everything that's positive or good for us. And that's why the darkness uses the 6s all the time. They understand the power of it, but we're taught to be afraid of it. And if we're afraid of it, we can't use that energy. So whatever those days are, the 666 days in June, it's going to be interesting, because we'll just see what happens on those days and how open people are to receiving the good.
Well, and that's that right there. So in my experience, 6 is a divine compensation number, meaning that you're going to get back what you've given out, which is why most people retire in their 60s. They've spent their whole lives putting out, and they finally get to cash in the 6th decade. But all those 6 months or so, 666 days especially, are about receiving what we are meant to have as compensation for the work we've done, and not a bad way, not in a bad way at all. But you know, but the key though also is knowing the vibration you're putting out there, what you're expecting from those days, and realizing that you're going to attract to you whatever it is you're expecting and vibrating with, right? So keeping that vibration high, not letting it intimidate you, and not letting yourself be filled with fear about it, because that's what they want you to, because that will ensure that you're going to attract the crap to you. You got to stay above that, above the line, and overly in the love space, so that all that comes back to you is love.
Yeah. More or less, you know, we still have a few things that we have to cut through. And when we're looking at what's happening, certain groups are being targeted right now. So that's not your fault. You didn't put that out there that you wanted that to happen. So there is a responsibility there to stop causing others pain. But ultimately what you're saying, I agree with. That's like, it's almost like the long game where you're going. Once we clear out the nonsense, a lot of people are speaking up right now, and they're getting targeted. So, and it's the people that like, they don't want change. So they're going after whoever's speaking up. We're hearing this, different doctors. We're hearing this. I think Jordan Peterson's getting attacked again. Like, there's a lot of people getting attacked just for doing the right thing. So it's not that they ordered or called in the darkness to come at them, but it is a byproduct of doing what they feel they need to do. It's just one of those things that happens that you realize people are going to try to stop them, right?
It's the reaction to your action. So cause and effect is deal there, right? And again, just because you're putting it out there doesn't mean you're always going to get it back. Sometimes you're going to get it back as a slingshot reaction or a knee-jerk reaction, so that it can be acknowledged for what it is, right? I mean, and really, I don't know, good and bad, I don't know, you know, the whole thing is starting to get a little tiresome to me. It's all about what works and what doesn't, and what doesn't work is darkness. Not on this planet, not for much longer. It has for a while, but we're coming out of that phase. And you know as well as I do that you can walk into a dark room and light a match, and boom, there's no more complete darkness, right? There's a little bit of light going on, and it can expand. So we just need to keep that in mind.
Yes, and trusting ourselves that what you're here to do, whatever you feel called to do it. Do what makes your heart sing. Do what really makes you come alive. Do the thing that just you're always thinking about, that you're almost not obsessed about, but just it just has a hold of your heart. Do that, and it doesn't mean you're going to be doing that forever. You might just go through a phase where you do that, and then you change your mind and start doing something else. So it's all good, right?
Do
Yeah,
what
I think
makes you
so too.
happy, do what makes your heart sing, just like you said, and do it for as long as possible, as often as possible, and as much as you can. But know also that, again, in that knee-jerk reaction, your light, your brilliance, your radiance is going to irritate the shit out of some of the dark people who don't want to go into that light space. They just don't,
Yes,
and they doesn't feel good. It's like throwing holy water on them or something. I don't know, but
yes.
it's the deal, and you got to let them be. That's their deal. That's their that's their job to recognize for themselves what their role is and what they're playing and what they need to do for themselves. And we can't save everybody. We really
Yeah,
can't. There are certain people who just need to do what they're doing, and you got to let them be at it. You
yeah.
got to have allowing, right? Tolerance and allowing are very, very different. There's two sides of the same coin, though, right? Allowing says, I'm good with where you are. Tolerating says, I don't really like what you're doing, but I'm gonna let you do it anyway.
Right.
Because you have the right. And we've got to really keep an eye on that.
And it depends on who they're what the tolerating is. Is it because they're infringing on somebody else, or what? Like there's a lot of gray matter to both those, for sure.
Absolutely. There's
Right.
always a gray space in between the light and dark, isn't there?
Yes. So we're definitely on the right side of the winter time. And like you said, it's nice outside and the flowers are blooming and starting to see a lot of that, a lot of trilliums out in the forest. We're seeing a lot of beautiful, the beautiful spring planting again. So all good stuff. But yeah, it's really important that we wanted to share this today about healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships. Take stock of where you're at. Doesn't mean it's forever. And love
No,
yourself, right? Be the light, be the love for yourself, but be the love for others, and hold that space, because we are going to go through some more rocky times, but it doesn't mean it has to be all doom and gloom.
no, it doesn't. And being a love for yourself is important, because oftentimes when good people who are highly regarded as being good and decent people, pillars of the community, are exhibiting those and being an example of those particular qualities and traits, like loving themselves ultimately and unconditionally and all of those things. And unconditional is interesting because that means there's no stipulations or conditions that apply, but that doesn't mean I allow you and I tolerate or accept your behavior if you're being an asshole to me, because it's not about that.
Yeah,
There are boundaries to set that are
totally.
healthy. But, coming back to that whole concept there, it's really important to be that light, be that love for yourself, because then other people often look at you and go, well, geez, if you're such a good person and you're doing this, then it might be okay for me to do it too. And in
Yeah.
some cases, you actually offer them a way to receive or give them permission to be that for themselves, knowing that it's not going to take away from who they are. It's going to amplify who they are.
Yes, totally. I agree with that 100%. And people have to do it for themselves. It's not one. People can help you to get where you want to be in that, the confidence and the self-love. People can help you get there, but you have to ultimately do the work. It's an inside job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's not just a one and done either. You can't have one shower a year and expect to stay clean all year. You got to keep it up. You got to keep working on it, because you're going to get hit with shit all the time. And at some point, you're either going to have it on your shoe or you're going to be trailing that toilet paper along with you, and you just need to know it's there. Do something about it.
Right. Yes, totally. So that's, it's really a good message, I think, that we're sharing for everybody today, because a lot of people are frustrated and they're losing faith and they're losing hope and they're not sure where things are going. And none of us know. We don't know. But if we keep holding that love vibration, is that going to help bring in a positive energy and a positive change? Let's hope. That's what I'm hoping for. So.
And I would say that that's the key. So right now we have an enormous amount of darkness that's floating across the planet. It's come to the surface to be acknowledged and cleared and transmuted in a way, or at least even released to its own place. It's got to go home to where it belongs. However, I do know that, the more of us who are holding that light, we help tip the scale. The more light you have, the brighter it is, and the less the darkness can exist. And, again, a light in a dark room, but you get 20 lights in a dark room and all of a sudden it's brilliant, and it does tip that light quotient so that we can elevate, because it's the love and the light literally that brings us to that higher frequency. Everything else is, as we've talked about before, below that 0 point, which is a negative concept, but it's also that fear and all that other stuff that holds people down in the darkness. Nobody wants to stay in the cellar. Everybody wants to come up and see and be in the light, right?
And it's interesting because when we're talking about the light, one of the best ways to be the light is be in integrity. Have a strong moral foundation. Be honest, want fairness for people. It doesn't mean you're not going to get what you want out of the world, but these are the things that we need to see. And this is what helps people hold the light. Be your best version of yourself without taking from somebody else. So that's what's missing in our society, is being the best we can be. Because when you feel good about yourself, you're proud of yourself, but proud for the right reasons. You're proud of your accomplishments. You're proud of maybe how you function within certain people, or what you do for others, and how you treat other people and how you treat yourself, right? So there's all kinds of things, but a lot of this comes down to your moral fiber and your integrity. And that's what we've been all encouraged to be away from, and compete with each other over stupid things or non-existent things. And that's not how we get to be that higher energy, the higher vibration. I know a lot of people are getting hit because they are that. They are shining as the light, and it's an intimidation to somebody who isn't. It's like, you're not in the same race.
Absolutely not. And there's this conflict, right, about that kind of idea, where you have this sort of, I mean, let's face it, war has been one of the things on this planet that has been a very consistent, and not only is it a moneymaker for certain people and certain places, but it's also a guarantee keeping everybody down, guaranteed to keep them down, keep them in that place of darkness and that density that is those lower vibrations. Why? Because you're constantly fighting something.
And when you look at those wars that are, what the atrocities that are done to the people, they're actually terrorizing the citizens of those countries. And this has to stop. This has to be called out. And I think we talked last week a bit about the what the military's taught. I'm not going to go in and say that again, but it's absolutely disgusting what they're taught to do to women and children and other men in other countries, as if it's your right to go in and do whatever you want. We're hearing horrific stories in the Ukraine, which should never have happened. All the wars in the Middle East, they shouldn't have happened. It was all over something other than weapons of mass destruction, or whatever they call it. It's all over money. This is why this shit needs to stop, right? So we got to stop calling out, or stop allowing the wars. Those are things that we can start calling out. I'm just blown away by the number of flags I see, blue and yellow. And then, there's other things that are blue and yellow. I'm wondering what it is about that combination of colors, because I'm seeing political signs now, blue and yellow. I'm seeing city vans, blue and yellow. And I'm like, what is it with those two colors? So maybe, I don't know. And I don't think we should say what it is.
No, but I will say this, if you know what the colors mean and what they vibrate with, because the yellow is over the blue in most cases, you have power over truth. Power over truth rather than truth under, right? Truth is supposed to be here and power is here. Power is not supposed to overrule truth.
Very nice way of looking at that. Very nice way of looking at that. So maybe on that note, we'll stop today. And if anybody wants to reach us, we'll have both our information in the description box and our contact information and where you can find us. And by all means, everybody have a great weekend. Keep smiling, do the best you can with these crazy times, and love yourself.
Absolutely. So, love yourself fully and completely, and watch what happens to the rest of your world. And something a little mantra can say is, I love myself, I love myself. And at first you might have a challenge, with that, but eventually it does get easier, because at our core, in our soul and our higher self, when it comes together, you have that willingness to receive that, because it's true. To love yourself is truth, right? It's not about loving yourself to the detriment of another or all that in a bag of chips, but it's definitely about just allowing yourself to be and recognize what that means.
And look in the mirror and tell yourself, and look with your left eye, because your left eye traditionally is less dominant than your right eye. Look in the mirror and say 3 times, I love you, I love you, I love you. And if you're not in the habit of doing it, you're going to witness it in the mirror. You're going to see yourself saying it, you're going to receive it, and you're going to see if you shrink back from it. And if you do, then maybe you have some growth to do in there. So
mirror work is very powerful. A lot of people can't look at themselves for any longer than to put makeup on or brush their teeth and hair. And that's another thing we've been taught. That's vanity. You spend more than 3 minutes staring at yourself and your vanity. You've got a vanity issue. Well, looking in your eyes, you're speaking to your soul now. You're not just talking to you. There's more beyond the eye, right? So that's interesting, the left and right, because we know the left side of our head anyway is guaranteed to connect to the right side of our body, and vice versa with the crossing of hemispheres. But that's important to note, because right away you're recognizing that's a masculine trait we're working on, and we have to work that way.
It's interesting. I was working with this couple, and I was working with the husband at the time, and we were doing eye gazing. And I showed him because he was trying to connect with his wife. And I said, okay, connect with your left eye, but don't tell her what you're doing. Let her feel you. So we went in, I said, first, let's connect with our right eyes. We looked at right eyes and I went like this because we could have got into an arm wrestle. That was a very masculine look. We looked at each other with the left eye. And he goes, I can't do this because I wasn't his wife, right? But it was like, okay, but you get the exercise. He felt it right then and there, how much more connected you are when you're looking through your left eye. So practice, doesn't matter which eye you practice with yourself, but try with your left eye. Look at yourself energetically from your left eye and see what happens.
The window to the soul, aren't they?
Lots of fun. So,
It's
okay.
really hot this weekend, so enjoy it.
Yeah.
And hopefully we won't get rained on all weekend, but it is supposed to be very, very warm. So if you're, a sun lover like me, go out there and get some on you.
Yes,
good
and
for the
I
soul.
actually, with all the overcast, I actually put a sun lamp. I have a light that emulates sunlight, a lamp. So I put that on this morning just so I could have some sun in here. So beautiful.
Beautiful.
Okay,
It's,
everyone.
it's powerful time, definitely.
Yes,
So thank you very
sure.
much, Sandy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Always, you bet. Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye
Bye.
now.